Today's episode of This Week in Startups is brought to you by Citrix Sharefile, secure file transfer built for business. Visit sharefile.com, click on the microphone, and enter TWIST for a free 30-day trial. And by Walker Corporate Law, a boutique law firm specializing in the representation of entrepreneurs. Visit them at walkercorporatelaw.com. And by AWS Activate, the Amazon Web Services startup program. It's easy to start and scale your business with AWS. Visit aws.amazon.com/activate.
Hey everybody, welcome to This Week in Startups. Today on the program, we have the CEO of Basis. Yes, this is the best wearable computer on the market. I am addicted to it. I've been using it for the last 2 months, and I absolutely love it. It's actually changing my behavior, and today we're going to talk with the CEO about where the company's going and the whole watch space and wearable space, because there's some companies that may be getting involved in it. You may have heard of two of them, Google and Apple. It's going to be an amazing episode. Stick with us.
That's what it's all about, man. They said money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. We ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you. Yeah, money is the root of all evil. What? Funny how it feeds my people. Yeah, we ain't gonna live like equals until we get the money, spend the money, and defeat you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Startups. Yes, it's me, your host, Jason Calacanis. We do this twice a week. We've been doing it for hundreds of episodes, and it's a pretty simple show. I mean, if you look at the title, This Week in Startups, every week we talk about startup companies, we talk about technology, the financing of technology companies, and just building new products that are awesome and change the world in some way, make people's lives better. And today on the program, I've got Jef Holove.
That's right.
I got it right, Holove.
Good guess.
And Jef is the CEO of a company called Basis, and they make this incredible wearable that I'm holding up here. It's a big, clunky watch. He probably doesn't like me saying that, but when people see me wearing it, they're like, is that like something from the 70s? And it's got, and I always say big and clunky. It's not like thin like a Swatch watch. It's a little bit thicker. But oh my God, am I addicted to this watch, and we're going to get into it in a bit. I just want to take a moment here to thank my friends at WeWork for building this gorgeous studio for me. I wouldn't be able to do the show so consistently, so regularly, with such a high caliber guest if it wasn't for the great studio that the WeWork folks built specifically for This Week in Startups. They have offices in New York, San Francisco, Boston, DC, Seattle, LA, and they're coming soon to Chicago and DC, London, Israel, and a bunch of places. If you want to be on the back channel for the show and talk with the other super fans, go to twistlist.co, twistlist.co, and you can follow the show at TWI Startups on Twitter, and I'm at Jason on Twitter. All right, Jef, you're a serial entrepreneur, CEO, and
guilty as charged.
Guilty as charged. Yeah. You've been working on the Basis watch. You came in as CEO after the first round of funding.
That's right.
Company's been around for about 3 years.
Company's been around for several years, but the first few years you're in that sort of, under the radar R&D mode, just trying to prove out the core technology, the core invention, the core magic you're trying to do. We sort of came onto the radar in 2011 with our Series A funding and showing the world what we intended to do, and then officially launched the product in 2012.
Okay, so when people see the watch, immediately they're going to think about like the Apple Watch, the Google Watch, all the stuff that people are talking about. But in truth, this is not a watch for doing SMS messages or email.
That's right.
What does this watch do?
So I think that's really important. I think, there's lots of exciting stuff happening in wearables generally today, and there's lots of different kind of versions of what wearables might be. There's a couple of different kinds of wearables that go on the wrist. There's the smartwatch, which we hear much about, and there's some anticipation of companies launching things later on this year.
Yeah, we had Samsung make two versions. You must have played with that. What did you think of that?
Well, I think that's a good segue to the other thing that's happening in wearables, some of which are done on the wrist, which is not really a smartwatch. It's about health and fitness. It's about addressing what the industry tends to call use case. It's about addressing some need that people have that isn't just duplicating what your phone does, but really addressing some issue in life, some goal you have to work on. In our case, health and fitness, also the same use case that Fitbit is working on, and many other good products. So my reaction to sort of distinguishing what we do, even though we look like a watch, from smartwatches per se, is kind of exactly that point, that smartwatches as we've seen them today largely duplicate what your phone already does. And I sort of operate, and my team sort of operates with the principle that consumers, by and large, at least those of outside Silicon Valley where we all sit and ooh and ah over every new gadget that comes out, consumers are not by and large sitting around just waiting for the day when they get to wear technology, right? they've got life's challenges, they've got their problems, they've got their busy schedules.
They're not just like, oh, what is the newest thing? Let me put it on my wrist.
Exactly. I'm not just sitting around waiting for what is the thing I get to wear. They're looking to solve problems. And so I think by and large, what we've seen out of smartwatches today is they don't solve some new problem that already wasn't pretty well handled by people's smartphones.
Yeah.
I think health and fitness devices are solving a new problem. And I think one of the reasons that you often see those kinds of products as a wearable is because by putting it on your body, by putting it in contact with your body, you can do things with those products that you just simply cannot do fundamentally with a smartphone.
Now, the thing that really drew me to it initially was something I had never heard about. But if you look on the back of the watch, and every once in a while, it will flicker a green laser. And then there's also these 6 little diodes that are touching my skin.
That's right.
Now, and sometimes when I'm like, I was at the club last night and like people are like, what is your green laser? What is that green thing going on your watch? And then they think my watch is like something from like THX or, you know, like some like science fiction movie like Silent Running or something. And I'm like, no, it's a thing. And it's, what does the green laser do? Tell the audience.
So this was actually the thing that drew me to Basis when I met the guys long before the product launched. So this is a health and fitness device, and the early guys in the company, the founder and the early team had this insight that if we really want to help you with your health and fitness, then we need to understand not just your activities, not just counting steps, which many pedometers do and have done for ages. What we really need to understand is how is your body responding to the activities you're asking it to do, really getting at biosignals, getting at something deeper than just steps. So one of the most fundamental biosignals, one of the most helpful signals that we can track to understand your health is your heart rate. So that little sensor array that you pointed out on the bottom is pretty darn clever. We're shining light via those little LEDs into your skin. We've chosen a very particular light frequency that shines deeply enough into your skin to shine through your capillaries where your blood is flowing. And then that optical center that's in the middle of those two LEDs actually measures the reflection of that light back into our own device. And by doing that, we can detect your blood flow. We can actually see your blood moving. And from that, we get at your heart rate. So
how accurate is it?
So what we like to say is, so it's very accurate. What we do is in the moments when there is signal noise, there's all kinds of reasons that any signal might get interrupted for a minute or for a second. Yeah. So what we choose to do is we hold a very high bar for accuracy. And if the signal isn't clean enough to meet that bar, then we just don't show you a number, period. So we'd rather not show you a number and risk that it be wildly wrong. Got it. And that means that when you look at it, of course, your heart goes up and down. If I stood up, all of a sudden my heart rate would shoot up very, very briefly and then settle back down. You'll see that kind of data when you look at the device. But if you're in a situation in which the signal is just too raw for us to do a good job of tracking it, then we'll just not show you. Which might be running. And so
this is where the big confusion is, because I almost gave up on the product. I don't know if you saw my exchange with the social media account a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. But I was like, hey, I'm using it, I'm running, and it's not working. And they're like, oh, well, read this page. And it's like, oh, well, we don't really do like second-by-second heart tracking like, what is it, Polaris?
Like Polar or Garmin or any of these kind of chest strap guys. Yeah,
and I was like, wait a second, that's confounding to me. Yeah. And I almost gave up on it because I was like, well, the whole reason to get this is to have my heart rate. But then they sort of explained it to me, and this is like really the power of social media, because like I was almost going to give up, and there was did you run the social media or some person for you?
I don't run it myself, but we've got some good folks who care a lot about our users.
Whoever is running your social media, you need to literally give them, when you get back to the office, a $1,000 gift card. Because the reason you're on the show is because of the save that you gave them. Because I was like, it doesn't do my heart rate. And I was like, no, let me look at this and look at this thing. And I was like, oh, because here, let me pull up my screen. And I'll show you why I all of a sudden got super addicted to this. So now on my screen, you can see it on the courtesy monitor right behind you there. Yep. I can see my heart rate. This is yesterday. And I wear the device probably 16 hours a day. Okay. And when I saw this screen, it hit me. Okay, this technology is not going to do second-by-second heart rate. It's not designed for that.
Yep. Not during high activities, not during your run or your bike ride. Right. Yeah.
And as you can see here at 8 in the morning, I did my morning run, and my heart rate shot way up. You got a reading there for 130, but it probably went up to 150 even. But that's not what's important. You have my heart rate the entire day.
That's right.
And I've never had this data. I've always wanted this.
Nobody's ever had this data.
Nobody's ever had this data. And I said to myself, my God, this is like otherworldly. I'm going to know, what if I had this information for my entire life? This is like the Holter monitor that my mom used to do as a nurse. She used to read the Holter monitor things. I mean, it's not like 8 different connection points. But boy, is this sexy and amazing that it can do this. So what else are people seeing on this screen? We'll walk through it here a little bit.
Before we get to this, I'll give you a sort of navigation of the user interface and the screen that we're looking at now. But I think you hit on so many important points there that are not just important to Basis and our users being happy, but startups in general and the lessons that we have learned. I think, being very, very clear and transparent about what you do, realizing that when people really love your product, they're going to come into it with what they really hope that it does, no matter how you describe what the product really, really does.
Right.
And in our case, like perhaps in many others, people who come into Basis understanding that it tracks heart rate, the only frame of reference people have for tracking heart rate is exactly the one that you mentioned, which is the Pollars, the Garmins, the things that are—
Which I have on my treadmill.
Of course.
Right.
The deal is those devices are great for tracking, the 30 minutes that you might be running or riding your bike, et cetera, but nobody's going to wear those things 24/7, right?
Of course not.
The important thing is to understand that, yes, the heart rate, of course, is very important during your actual activity, but it's the other 23 hours of the day that are even more important. And we were trying to design truly a lifestyle-oriented health and fitness device that was about 24/7, not just about your exercise. Because let's face it, most of us don't exercise as much as we should, some not at all, and yet it's still important that we all find those health moments in our regular day.
Yeah.
So this is aimed to help you do that.
And the first thing I thought after I kind of had my aha moment when I sort of figured the product out based on your great social media person who you're going to give $1,000 gift card to when you get back to the office.
Making my life very difficult,
Exactly. No, I'm telling you, whoever it is, God, I'll hire you in a heartbeat, man. This person's genius. Anyway, because they knew, I think they knew, oh, wait a second, this is Jason Calacanis. He's got 200,000 followers. They really, really stayed on me. Oh, did you read it? And are you cool with it? It was pretty funny. But anyway, the first thing I thought is, what an opportunity. If you guys made a Basis chest strap, and I could complement that during that period and have all my data in one place, wow. But I have to say that this HUD, as we call it in the business, this heads-up display here, and the gamification that you built, because I have used everything. Fitbit, I have used Fitbit, and I've used the Nike Fuel. I have the Wheeling scale. This is literally the best. And when we get back from this commercial break, we're going to go into it in detail. All right, listen. Everybody, thanks so much to my friends at Citrix by Sharefile. Yes, Citrix Sharefile is designed for business, and with Sharefile, you can trust that your files are being sent securely. These are for sensitive documents, the important stuff like IP, contracts, term sheets, all the important stuff that CEOs like us have to send around. And you can send files of almost any size with secure links, and you can have access to them from any computer or mobile device. That's right, like your iOS or Android, whatever. And it has incredible killer features, as you can see here on my screen, just like I was demoing the Basis. Here you can see how we use Sharefile here at This Week in Startups. And you can request files. So if we have a sponsor and we need to get the video from them, or we have a client or whatever it is, we can request that they upload it to a specific folder, and then we get email alerts when those come in. We can control who has access to it. Some people have read-only. Some people can edit it or change it. And you can share huge, large video files, which is really important for us. And of course, I want you to go to sharefile.com right now and click on Podcast Listeners Microphone button. And that's in the upper right-hand corner. And you're going to use the offer code TWIST. No credit card required, 30-day free trial. So go ahead and go to sharefile.com, click on Podcast Listeners Microphone button, and use the promo code TWIST. That's This Week in Startups. We use that as our handle, TWIST. Again, no credit card required, 30-day free trial. And hey, we use this product. We love it. And as part of our partnership with them, we took a part 2 on how to raise money from angel investors. This is an exclusive part 2, even more in depth than the first part I did on This Week in Startups. And you can get that by just going to Sharefile and using the offer code TWIST, and then you're going to request a file link to sharefile@launch.co. That's right. You just get Sharefile, and then you request a file link to sharefile@launch.co, and we'll send you that all new exclusive video only available through Sharefile. And that proves that you can send a huge file through it, big HD file. Thanks again to my friends at Sharefile, Citrix Sharefile. Just a wonderful product, and we love using it here at the office. Thanks for supporting independent media like This Week in Startups. All right. So today on the program, Jef Holove. Holove. What is it? Is that what's it?
Well, originally, if you go back far enough, it's an abbreviation that happened coming through Ellis Island. It's originally Russian.
Is it Russian?
It used to be Holovchenko.
Holovchenko.
Back
and
far
it's
enough.
Interesting. My name, Calacanis, when we went through Ellis Island, was Kalikanis, which means to do well, to have done well, with K's. And when my grandfather went through, he said, Calicanis, and they said, Calicanis? Boom. And he said, no, two Ks. And they're like, just.
Next.
You made it. Sit the fuck. Same thing, right? Anyway.
Well, you seem to be doing well. Way to live up to the family name.
Absolutely. So here is the interface. And so I don't even know where to begin first, but I have to say, again, just, making your life difficult, you've got to give a raise to whoever designed all this. Who designed this beautiful stuff? Really just amazing.
Team effort, as you can imagine, right?
Gorgeous. So here, this is the gamification.
Yeah.
And when you start using the product, the first thing it tries to get you to do is to wear the watch.
That's right.
And it's
Can't
great.
do anything else if you don't wear the watch and we get the data.
Precisely. And here you can see I have worn it, and yesterday I wore it for, I wonder how many hours I wore it for yesterday. I wore it for 23 hours. I took it off to charge it, basically.
Nice work.
And so I wear this a lot. And so last week I was on vacation, and I didn't hit my record every day, but I did wear it for about 11. The reason I don't have greens there, look at 14 hours, is because I raised it up to 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
So I really have
Which is every waking moment, basically.
Basically, yeah. And it does sleep as well. But then you can see here, don't be a sitter. And I raised that to 90 minutes. So that was the second, it unlocked that, right? Once you wear it for a day, then you unlock your next challenge.
Yeah, so there's a lot of behavioral science that's actually driving this, and you hit on a principle that's really, really important. We think that it's relatively unique to Basis, but we think this is the key to this whole category of health and fitness. As you and I were saying off the air, getting people to try these devices, ours or anybody else's, isn't really the challenge. It's a hot category. It's growing fast. It's in every retailer now. People are buying these things. They're trying them. The trick is getting people to stick with them, right? The only way that we can make a fundamental difference in your health is if you do it for a while. You can't solve health in a week, right? So with that in mind, we built what you have been looking at here. We call this healthy habits, and it's exactly that. It's trying to introduce you to and get you to follow some new routines in your life. And the whole point is not doing big things occasionally. It's doing small things regularly. So our whole system, the gamification that's built around it, the reward that we give you, the points that we give you is all around the notion of doing things routinely, frequently. We give you more points the more often you do them.
Yep.
And we
so here it is.
That,
look, with the don't be a sitter, if I click this, because I'm supposed to do it times 3 a week, I guess is what that means.
That times 3 means you have been doing it very consistently. So now you're getting basically 3x bonus points.
Right. And so when I click it, all these bonus points come up. And then over time, every time you hit a different level, you could unlock a new habit.
That's right.
And now I have to tell you, this is actually, I'm a 43-year-old man who doesn't play video games anymore. I play cards. Yeah. It's actually driving my behavior, which I find in some ways disturbing that I'm so easily manipulated to unlock the next thing. But in another way, I'm it's quite delightful because look, I have morning lap was one, then run club, I added run club, then consistent bedtime, which I fell on.
Bedtime is, or sleep anyway, is key to health, and we forget this. We think about health as fitness, as in running or biking or whatever, but sleep is fundamental to your health.
Then I added evening lap, and then this week I unlocked my newest one, torch more calories. And you can actually set these all up, and you can increase the amount and stuff, but boy, am I having a great time doing all of this. And I don't know, what level am I? I'm level 5.
Yeah,
that's pretty good for a couple of weeks, right?
That's very good for a couple of weeks,
yeah. Now, let's get back to this insights page here, because this is the thing, or the activity details.
Yeah.
This screen, to me, is the screen I've always wanted to have. And I have been taking screenshots of this and my breathing scale and sending it to my nutritionist and my doctor.
Okay.
Because I've been trying to lose weight and get healthier because I had all these issues because I was so overweight. I was literally 25 pounds heavier than I am right now. And I still got 10, 15 pounds to go. So
good
this is literally
taking that on.
What's that?
I said, good for you taking that on. Everybody does.
I used to run marathons. And then, you when you have a TV show like this, look, my face, I'm still a little bit chubby here. And then I look like a big pumpkin at one point. And I was like, this is terrible. I'm on television. I got to look thin. But this screen is the money screen. Tell people what is on this screen.
So this is the other thing that Basis is sort of best known for. The other thing that we really, really concentrated on. The first one is, getting people to stick with this, helping them develop habits, helping them act on the data. That healthy habits thing. The second thing though is the richness or the depth of the data that's here. So we have 5 sensors running continuously all the time in your Basis band. There's no modes that you have to set. You don't have to turn it on. You don't have to tell it you're going to go to sleep. You don't have to tell it you're going to go for a run. All these sensors are tracking data all the time. And then this section of the website you're looking at now, the activities details section, is your way of consuming that data, of interacting with it. You can zoom in on a particular hour where something interesting happened. You can zoom all the way out and look at a whole day at once. You can see your heart rate as you were just doing across your whole day. You can look at your steps. You can look at your calories. We also measure skin temperature, ambient temperature, your perspiration level, so you can see not just when you were active, but when was that active intense enough for your body to start perspiring.
Yeah. Now, what's this story with the perspiration? Let's look at that for a second. And I'm going to share with the world how much I how much sweat I produced yesterday to a certain extent here. But I'm going to take my skin temperature off for a second. Yeah. But what is this variability in my perspiration about? Like here, I guess I was sitting, so it was low, or maybe I was in air conditioning.
Could be.
And then here, I think I was driving home. It was like hot. Yep. And then I think I was like, putting the kid to bed and going, and then I was out of the club. And I guess I started sweating in the club, which is really disgusting. But Jay-Z and Beyonce showed up at the club last night. True story. But anyway.
That'd make a person nervous, maybe.
I think maybe that's what it was. Yeah. Maybe I started perspirating because Bay was there. But why is this so variable and everything else is so consistent, do you think? Is perspiration just hard to track? How accurate is perspiration?
Well,
and why should I care about perspiration?
Well, not every piece of data is going to show you something interesting every single moment, right? But you have all this to work with now, right? And so we have users who are, who are spotting these things. Like, so for instance, I was talking to another journalist who shared something with me that I had also observed about myself. They were spiking in perspiration at night while they were sleeping. For a particular time, usually 2 or 3 hours before their wake up time, and I was seeing exactly the same pattern. Now, I don't know.
Are you anxious about the new version coming out?
Yeah, maybe.
Night sweats, dude?
Right. Yeah, I mean, every day as a startup is an anxious day, right? Every day as a startup is an anxious day. Could have been dreaming. It could have been that the air goes off, and after so many hours of the air being off, the room gets warm. It could be any of these things. The point is, we give you enough data to start analyzing these things and looking into these questions.
And what was it? Did you have like the wrong sheets? You had like silk sheets that don't breathe?
My analysis of that particular thing was exactly what I described. The air was programmed to automatically go off in the evening, and after several hours, the house warms up.
So that was
under
effing
blankets
with your sleeve, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, what about skin temperature? What can I learn about skin temperature? Because this is pretty consistent.
So some of these signals are sort of ingredients, if you like, to our overall algorithm. So skin temperature is interesting. If you think about, right, your perspiration might go up, or your heart rate might go up for any number of things. Your skin temperature could go up because you are in the sun or you went into a very warm room versus you're being very active. So some of these signals for us are not intended to be insightful on their own. They're intended to be ingredients into other things, like our calorie calculation, as an example, is a multi-sensor. We don't calculate calories just from the accelerometer, and we know that you were taking steps, and therefore you burned 100 calories. So some of these pieces of data are there to help flesh out, to help enrich our algorithm so that our calorie calculation, as an example, is smarter than the one you might get from another product.
And look at this. Here's a really interesting, when you pick a particular moment in time, when I was running yesterday, I can actually see a snapshot here of like I'm running, doing 1,000 steps for 12 minutes. We're doing a 12-minute average mile for 7 minutes. I was just jogging. 126 beats per minute, 71, 7.5, 83.1 skin, 28.9. What is that one? This. So
where are you?
Right there. Just on the right-hand side, 9:02 a.m. What is the number right above that? The 28.9.
So this is that's perspiration, and then skin temperature.
Got it. Perspiration. Got it.
Calories per minute.
Got it.
Yep.
So this like level of data is how. Is this almost like too much data? I guess is sort of what I'm getting at. Like, because that's what I sort of got overwhelmed by the screen at a certain point. Like, I didn't actually know what I should be thinking of it, right? So. How do you handle that specific issue with the product? It's
a perfect question from a really, again, if we're speaking about startups broadly and not just Basis, and what lessons have we learned over time? In our case, we're trying to address some very clear needs that we had heard throughout our development. As soon as people started hearing about what Basis was doing, we got a lot of interest from what has become known as the quantified self movement, right? People who are self-analysts, people who are self-scientists, people who really study themselves, and they want rich amounts of data to work with. That isn't most of us, we can agree, right? Right. So we built a user experience. Not yet. And I would argue it's probably never going to be the middle of the bell curve, although we are all getting used to having more data about ourselves. Yeah. The question is, how do you make that data relevant? So to try to address both the very, very specific needs of sort of the quantified self audience and those who are interested in the data and who are going to kind of do those self insights, we built this data section that we were just looking at. There's another section of the website that kind of does all the work for you that we call the insights section.
Yeah, here it is.
Right. So the insight section is going to look at all that same data that we were just looking at, and it's going to sort of in a feed fashion, right? We've all seen many feeds and various user experiences today. Now, this is going to sort of create a feed of the interesting moments out of all of that data for you. So it'll automatically detect and show you that we found a walk or a run. It'll automatically detect and show you how much sleep you got for a particular night, including your sleep quality score and all of those things. So we built a system for those who don't want to dive into all of the data, except for when there's something that's really intrigued them.
Here's like Monday, yesterday for me. I hit 7 of 7 habits. That was a great day.
That's a very good day.
Yeah, I don't usually do that, but I burned 3,000 calories. I took 8,000 steps. I was active for an hour and 12 minutes. I slept for 6 hours and a half. I had a sleep score of 77, which I guess is not so good.
That's not terrific.
Not terrific, but that's sort of the story of my life. But here, what I really found interesting about the sleep is interrupted one time for 5 minutes, tossed and turned 35 times. You have a 5-year-old who gets up sometimes. And I got to bed too late and I got up too early, I guess. But you get this detail of sleep. Now, I was really into the sleep stuff. I had a Myzeo. You remember that product?
Oh, yes, I do.
You'd wear it on your head.
Yep.
And
yep, I know Ben Rubin, the founder of that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Now, they went under. They couldn't make it. But you have what seems like pretty accurate compared to what I had with them, just by wearing it on the wrist. How does it know I'm in REM light or deep sleep, or I've been interrupted by me wearing a watch? This is confounding to me.
So this is the magic. This is the beauty of actually getting real biosignals. This is what comes out of being able to really see what your body is doing, particularly getting at deeper stuff like heart rate. Your body and the signals it put off tells us an awful lot. The Zeo product was a great product, but awesome. But because of the technology it used, it required you to wear that device around your head when you sleep.
You looked a little bit weird.
Which gives you tremendous data. Right. It was a good technology, just like a chest strap is a great technology for what it was designed for, but it does create a user experience that doesn't appeal to everyone, right? It's a lot of friction to kind of get your head around, pardon the pun, get your head around going to bed with this thing around your head, right? So great science behind it, great technology behind it, but a user experience that was high friction. Obviously wearing something around your wrist, much less friction.
Yeah. Although even wearing it around the wrist is kind of a pain in the ass. Like I take it off at night most nights, but some nights I feel like I want to know if I slept well.
Exactly. And I take it off some nights as well, but I wear it some nights because I want to check in and see how I'm doing. Yeah. Obviously, what we were saying about early, this is the other edge of the sword. The beauty about wearable technology is it gives us the ability to literally put sensors on your body to discover things we couldn't otherwise. The flip side of that is you got to wear technology on your body if we're going to get this kind of data.
The battery seems to last for me like, I would say the battery lasts for me 3 or 4 days.
Yep, that's about right.
That seems to be an amazing accomplishment to me because I had the Samsung Generation 1 watch, which I know is more of a computer than a sports and health and fitness watch. But I returned it essentially because it lasted less than a day. I mean, it was a disaster. Yeah. How did you make it so efficient?
Well, it's funny because in this category of wearables, there's lots of enthusiasm and excitement about the category. One of the really mundane but fundamental issues about wearable technology is battery technology. Yeah. It's not sexy to talk about, but it's really truly fundamental. Every time that you have to recharge, you have to take a device off, and every time you take a device off, it's an opportunity to not put it back on and to lose the user experience.
Yes. Which is Google Glass, lasts like 3 or 4 hours. Disaster.
So these are real problems when it comes to wearable technology, and thus something that we concentrated on very, very much from the very beginning. So there's a few things that went into what we do. The size of the device is partly driven by having a battery in there that we know is going to last several days. We wanted to be able to get through a long weekend without having to take
3/4 of an inch thick? An inch?
It's 15 millimeters. Okay.
So it's not, people are going to notice it. And for women, like my wife was like, I'm not sure if I'm into it. So do you have an issue with women not wanting to wear the device, and how are you going to address that?
Well, I can definitely say that the majority of our users are men. We do get women, and I think they make the decision that they value the data that comes out of it as much as anything, and so they wear it. But clearly, something that we're thinking about as we think about the future. But on the other hand, people want it to last several days, and so physics is physics, and it's got to have a battery in it. In addition to that, we did a whole bunch of system level optimization around how exactly we're using the battery, when things are on and off. As an example, we did this.
It keeps the screen very dim, and like when you scroll through it, it like is very light on the eye. Let's say, and it immediately goes off.
That's right. Yep. So, in fact, we built something, I don't know if you've noticed it yet, but we built an algorithm using the accelerometer data. If you pick up the device and look at it like you normally do a watch, we'll automatically turn the backlighting on because we know
I never noticed that
you want to have it be bright at that moment. And then as soon as you drop your wrist, we turn it off. So these are the kinds of things that we do to be very aggressive about managing power because we want it to last for 3 or 4 days for you.
All right. When we get back from our final commercial break, I want you to talk about like what you expect to happen in the marketplace, because there's a lot of new entrants coming, and also sort of how you think about the future of the Basis watch after this very important message. And this is an easy one for me to do. Scott Walker is a true mensch. He's a great guy. I've known him for many years, and he runs the Walker Corporate Law Group, which is a boutique law firm that specializes in the representation of entrepreneurs and startups, just like me and you. The Walker Corporate Law Group encourages fixed fees. That means they believe that billable hours will reward inefficiency, so you don't have to get that sticker shock when you get your bill every month, yada, yada, yada. You guys know what I'm talking about when you get the bill from your attorney and it's like, oh my God, how many hours? All of their lawyers have decades of experience. There's no junior associates getting on-the-job training with your startup. They do mergers and acquisitions, licensing, and terms of service and privacy policies, all that great stuff. And you can talk directly to Scott. He will sit down with founders. I've had him sit down with many founders who've been on the program or at the hackathon or at the conferences. And he'll just sit down with them and talk about the issues that are, troubling them. Let's put it that way. Like one time he talked to this company that had major IP issues that they had to deal with. Multiple founders, 2 founders leave, 2 say, they go to another company, all this stuff. It was like, it was crazy. And Scott just sat with them and walked them through it all. And he actually helped them get to resolution. It's a true story. You can email Scott at Walker Corporate Law, or you can call 415-979-9998. 979-9998. 415, that's San Francisco. 979-9998. Or go to walkercorporatelaw.com and go ahead and thank Scott Ed Walker and follow him on Twitter at Scott Ed Walker. Thanks, Scott, for being a total mensch and supporting the program for so many years and being great to all the startups out there. I really appreciate it. All right. So your life must be like everybody who's a friend of yours, every time you're out, asking you, what's up with the Apple Watch? What's up with the Android Gear? How do you look at those in terms of competition? Because while the Google Gear seems to be pretty clearly a smartwatch, not really about health, all indications are that the Apple product is essentially about health, and maybe more health than watch, like smartwatch, although nobody really knows. But you probably know something. Well, so what do you know? Like, what do you think you know? Take me through how you look at those competitors. Contrary
to some belief, there is not a secret email list you can be on to learn what Apple is doing before they're darn ready for you to learn what they're doing.
Yeah. But you try to you're hiring people that they're hiring as well.
Yeah.
So have you had a bidding war for like an employee versus them? Like that must have happened at some point.
I mean, it's a hot space right now, period, right? Yeah. I mean, hiring good talent right now is just hard for startups across the board in sort of broad areas like just software and app development at a generic level, as well as really specialized area like biosignal stuff that we're doing. I mean, it's a very hot market. And we can talk about, some of the things that we do about that. As I think about what's going to happen, I don't claim to have any particular insight on what Apple is going to do other than what we've all read and the set of assumptions that leads us to this. I think the iWatch is going to be a smartwatch in the distinction that I made earlier, but I think they have had the insight that I shared earlier, which is these devices, if we're going to wear them, have to solve a real need. They have to have a particular use case. So I think ultimately it is going to include some health and wellness capabilities. You've been around the block as much as I have. You know that there is this tremendous amount of speculation about what Apple might do before they launch a new product.
Yep.
And then when they launch the new product, it usually falls far short of a speculation because people imagine Apple doing very sort of bleeding edge kinds of things. But Apple has shown over and over and over that they are going to optimize around what is reliable, what is very, very ready for prime time, and that almost always leads them to not doing the bleeding edge, high risk stuff because for them, the satisfaction of their users, including a very broad, very mainstream base of users, is critical. And I applaud them for that. But that will leave plenty of room for people who are operating a brand and a business that allows them to be more forward on that edge. I do think over time, even though they may include a health and wellness use case as part of the device, I do think it's going to be a smartwatch. I think it's going to do everything. I think it's going to be part of the iOS ecosystem and have many, many use cases they're going to solve.
Like the Today iOS 8 updates where you can get like a little something on your home screen that gives you sports scores, or the interactive messages. The interactive alerts seems perfectly designed for a watch. Like you get an alert about your Uber's arriving, and you can yes, no, call them or not.
Right.
Or whatever.
These are examples of kind of broader smartwatch kinds of use cases that I just believe that that's what they'll do. Not because I have any terrible insight. I just think if you look at the kinds of devices they have built previously and the operating systems that run them, they're going to build a device that leverages the huge assets they've already created. Right. So It is astounding to me how few other companies, I think, have appreciated this notion about wearables solving a real use case and not just duplicating the features on a smaller screen in a arguably less convenient user experience. So I think that will happen. Who knows how deep they will go, though. As I hinted earlier, I think there will be plenty of room for not only startups but for other companies to continue to either be deeper in certain areas than any broad player, whether it be Samsung or Apple or whatever, will be, and to develop expertise in areas. That said, as you know, we were acquired by Intel earlier this year.
Yeah.
And part of our thinking about that was being part of one of the big platforms. Now, Intel is clearly a different kind of platform than an Apple is, but there is some really, really interesting things happening in Intel. We tend to think of Intel as a processor company, which of course they are, but they are also a software company. Third largest in the world, I think, is one of the stats that I've heard. And they're doing a lot of cool stuff. They have Intel Labs doing some really forward-looking research, including in biosignals and algorithmic stuff like we would leverage. So it puts us on a stage, a different kind of stage than Apple, but it puts us on a stage that allows us to do big things that will allow us to compete with some of the players that you're mentioning.
And it seems to me that nobody has nailed like the packaging of this and the sensor package of this. Somebody like Intel, who's just extraordinary at hardware, and obviously, as you're saying, they have a sort of less known software ability. Might we see Basis as a component of other watches? Like, so if a Google just doesn't have the density of knowledge, like if I pick a Google Wear watch, couldn't you just give Motorola or some other company your sensor array and then give them the entire package that you have here of software to be in other watches?
Yeah, it's a great question. And obviously, we don't announce anything that we might do very specifically, but clearly that's what Intel does a great job of, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And to the extent that Intel has talked about Basis, they've really said two things. One is, we wanted the leader in this space who had insights about what it takes to really genuinely build wearables and make them successful in the consumer space. Not only do we think that business by itself is valuable, but we hope the insight there helps us build other products. And they've said it's our biosensor technology, our algorithms, and some of the user experience insights that we have, like you mentioned at the beginning of this, that they think could be helpful to on a much broader basis than just the individual products that we might do.
What's the next great variable that you'll be able to record? I hear about oxygen level in your blood.
Yeah.
Are there sensors to do that today? And is that important?
I think the second part of that question is the key thing that we all need to hold on to and always ask ourselves when we're thinking about what we do next. Is it important? Is it relevant? Yes, you can do it. Does it really matter?
So it can be done.
Especially does it really matter to a broad user base? Yeah. So oxygen levels, to be honest, so pulse ox is how this technology is usually referred. It's exactly the same technology as the little thing that they put on the end of your finger when you go to the doctor, right, or to the hospital.
Right.
That technology is fundamentally exactly the same as what we're doing in Basis.
Right.
The principle is a little bit different in that when they put that thing on the end of your finger, they're shining light from one side through the other side and measuring it on the other side, whereas we're measuring the reflection. But otherwise, it's exactly the same.
So it could be done in a watch format.
Could be done. The question
it hasn't been done, though, has it?
It hasn't been done yet.
Right.
No. Question is, to what extent is it relevant? To what extent is it more important than other stuff that we might be able to do over time?
They knowing the blood oxygen level, when you're running, do professional athletes want to know that?
If you're a very high level athlete, or if you're, say, a mountain climber,
yeah.
There are use cases in which it could be interesting and important. There are use cases in which your blood oxygen level might change enough that it would be interesting to know.
Yeah.
For most of us, it doesn't change enough sort of day to day, hour to hour to be terribly insightful, to be terribly important. But that doesn't mean that there's not a lot of stuff that will be possible with biosensors, with either the sensors that we already have or new ones that
Well, that's
that
what I'm sort of getting at. Okay, so we put blood oxygen level, like, maybe Kobe Bryant wants to know, or some marathon runners who are, training in Denver or whatever at some high altitude or whatever, mountain climbers. What's the next one that technology currently doesn't support that you wish it did? Like, if you could have any one today.
Yeah, so I'm not going to give you a sensor answer, actually.
Yeah, not a sensor, but like a variable.
So here's the bigger idea that I would think about. So we have 5 sensors running all the time in our device. Could we add a 6th? Sure. What would it be? Ask me when we launch.
Yeah.
I think the bigger idea, though, is thinking about how many other data sources there are around you and available, and what new insights could come out of not just adding a new sensor to this, but tapping into all of those data sources that are around you. Yeah. So your phone, right? Your phone knows your geolocation, and there are weather databases out there. There's pollen databases out there. So there's all these sources of information that could be overlaid on top of your biophysical information,
genius. Right?
That could really start uncovering some interesting things that maybe sensors on the wrist alone don't get to. So if I think it's about context. I'll just say it that. It's about
if you knew my GPS was saying I was driving in a car or in stop and go traffic and my heart rate is up, like there's like an obvious use case. Hey, your heart rate's up because you're in gridlock.
Because you have road rage. We can add that as a new habit.
Now, what about blood pressure? Because I know We Things came out with a blood pressure cuff. They actually bought it. I never used it. Like I was just like, this thing's too ridiculously inconvenient. How important is blood pressure to get? And is there a way to get blood pressure on a regular basis that would not be ridiculously inconvenient if sensors keep going in a certain direction?
Yeah, I mean, blood pressure for certain users is tremendously important, right? Just like glucose for certain users is tremendously important.
Yeah.
The question is it really a specialty case, or is it very, very, sort of day-to-day mainstream?
Yeah.
And we're clearly aiming, at least today, at a very mainstream kind of general lifestyle product as opposed to a medical product. We have a very strong filter around the thing that you sort of just tossed in there, which is it's inconvenient. I bought it, but I don't really use it.
Yeah.
We're trying very hard not to invest our time in doing things that people aren't going to actually use.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that there are good things you can do that could be valuable that people won't do, and we're choosing mostly not to do those things. There's also one other important factor as a startup that may be less of a factor inside the home of an organization like Intel, and that is when you're entering into sort of medical realms, there's a lot of regulatory overhead, friction, red tape that comes with that, right? You get into FDA regulation, you start to get into HIPAA requirements, et cetera. And it's not that isn't a very lucrative and valuable area, but as a startup, one needs to be very conscious that as you enter those realms, it by definition means you are going to spend a lot of money and time on regulatory issues. And time is almost always working against startups, right?
What do you think, what's the difference between a medical device that needs to get approved and a smartwatch that's just for health?
General lifestyle health and fitness device? How do they draw that line? Because isn't like taking your heart rate and your perspiration, like it's not sort of medical, but it's also it seems to me like an arbitrary distinction. Like, isn't it how the person decides to use that data that determines if it's a medical device or not? Well, I'll let the FDA defend themselves on how arbitrary their guidelines are, and I don't claim to be an expert. Fortunately, we have an army of experts behind us now.
But
nice. I guess I'll invite you to think about it in a couple of these ways. Getting at biosignal information does not make a product automatically a health product, even though it's tracking something that could be health relevant, like heart rate.
Yeah.
One of the factors they use to determine that something is a medical device is if it's used to diagnose and or treat a medical condition.
Got it.
And your day-to-day fitness is not a medical condition.
No.
And we work very hard to make sure that we're not diagnosing or helping treat a medical condition. HIPAA as a regulatory area comes into play if your product is designed to share your personal data, your health data with your care providers, your physician.
Which is something I want to do. And I looked in the interface. I didn't see if I could share my data.
You cannot today.
I could give somebody my password, or I can take screenshots.
Yes.
Which is what I'm doing. I'm taking screenshots. And I actually should just give my password to my doctor. But if you...
I'm sure a security consultant would advise you against that, but
whatever.
It's your
it's my doctor. Yeah, listen, oh my God, they're going to know that I didn't sleep well last night. It's like I'm not really too concerned. Actually, what I would be very interested in would be, I wonder if people could contribute their data to a public database anonymously to start doing learning around this data. Is that something that's come up yet or no?
We hear about that on occasion.
Google keeps talking about that, right? Larry keeps talking about it. More from probably, DNA and other stuff side. But
yeah, I think one of the things to keep in mind is while there are some users who have that sort of, give back to the world, contribute to a greater good, let my data be useful in some grander way. There are some multiple of users of that who are very, very concerned about their privacy and their security, and even a system that allows data to be shared, even if you have control over it, creates a lot of concern. So
yeah, because your HIPAA stuff is a big concern, right? Like once you let me invite another person, you start to become responsible. So it's really up to me to export it or something and come up with my own system. Does it do an email alert every day, or can it do an email report that it emails me?
We do. We'll send you emails. We have some text alerts on your phone. Yeah. We can let you know what habits you've accomplished, or give you little prompts along the way.
What do you think of this Ohm Signal stuff? We had them at the launch festival last year. The shirt that gives your heart rate and stuff like that. Obviously you have to. That's like the top 10% of the whatever 30% who are currently using these kind of devices.
Yeah.
What do you think of that as a compliment to
even
what you're
BK,
doing?
the CEO of Intel, showed off a smart shirt that was able to do biosignal tracking, including heart rate. So I think it's very interesting. I think stuff like that will happen. Again, it does appeal more to athletes who are already kind of wearing dedicated gear for their moment of sport, as I like to call it anyway. And so therefore having dedicated gear that's enhanced with technology makes all the sense in the world. Once again, kind of coming back to mainstream, I think today the challenge with technology being built into your clothing, into your textiles is, okay, if I have a shirt that measures my heart rate, for my moment of sport, that's one thing. Am I going to have 7 shirts that measure my heart rate so that I can wear one every day, or 14 because I don't do laundry every week? Once you start thinking about how do you build it into your clothing, it's not just building it into one outfit. If it's really going to be 24/7 every day of the week, then it's got to proliferate it in all my clothing.
Yeah.
So not technically impossible, but just a real world use case. Got to work through how does that work, and is it cost effective to do it that way?
10 years from now, we'll just every piece of clothing or shoes we have just have some level of sensors in it. In 20 years or 10 or 20 years, would you be able to buy a pair of sneakers that doesn't have different gyroscopes or whatever in it, or different sensors in it that would just broadcast to your smartwatch or whatever, your phone?
I think you'll always be able to buy stuff that doesn't have these things for price point and privacy reasons. But I agree with the spirit of your question, which is in 20 years, it's going to be really prevalent. There's going to be for all kinds of reasons, for inventory tracking, for location, for keeping track of your kids, for myriad reasons, we're going to see sensors and data coming off of the inanimate objects around us all the time.
20 years from now, what will this look like? What will quantified self look like? Will we have things inside of our body? Will we know our glucose level? What would our, an average visit to the doctor be like, or an average day of reviewing your data be like 20 years from now?
Yeah, well, 20 years. So first of all, I'm not even sure that the notion of quantified self will exist then, for the same reason that you said earlier, which is today it does because it's sort of the tip of the spear. But over time, as this becomes more normal, people will be interacting with their data and analyzing themselves without considering themselves a quantified selfer because it's normal 20 years from now.
There'll be 20-year-olds who only know their entire life history.
And can't imagine not knowing their entire life history. They'll know
their entire life. They'll know their heart rate for their entire life, their blood pressure for their entire life, and their exercise patterns for their entire life. Is that possible? Weight, everything?
Yes, it will be possible.
Yeah.
I think a more interesting question is, will it be possible to not know, right? And I think 'cause there's going to be some people who don't want that as part of their life. But anyway, I think the way this works is, and you've heard this from many Internet of Things and wearable companies that have been on the show, I'm sure everything's going to be connected. I think, your body will be connected to your home. I don't believe, as some people try to proffer, I don't believe that there will be sort of one platform or one database. There will be many. And one of the questions that we will deal with as an industry is how to get all of these things eventually to talk to each other, and how do we give the consumer control over when they want them to talk to each other, right?
The health graph.
Exactly, right? So maybe I buy a product like Basis and I want my Basis health graph to tell me everything that it can, but maybe I don't want it to talk to
HealthBook from Apple.
The next one,
or
right?
Runkeeper or something.
So one of the things we're going to have to work out as an industry is how do we enable that for the people who want it?
Yeah.
That's safe, that's secure. If two different products count steps or count calories, how do we know that they both count them in the same ways, or how do we know that they're sort of comparable?
Yeah.
Which is not the case today, by the way, right? If you wear 4 different wearables that all count steps, you're going to get 4 different results.
And people are doing that, actually. You see some reports from the quantified self people like, look, I got a different thing from Fitbit or from this and that.
Exactly. So it's these kinds of issues as we really think about how all this data is going to be interconnected in the future. The devil's always in the details. You really got to get down into how is this really going to work? If there's people who worry about how much is my health data going to influence long-term my insurance rates or something like that. And we're already seeing that in the auto industry, right? There's an insurance company that if you put a black box in your car, they'll give you a discount on your insurance rates.
Absolutely.
Now, in their defense,
it's opt-in, right?
First of all, it's opt-in. And as I understand it, you get the discount regardless of what the data says about your driving. It's not based on your actual driving habits.
It's based on you put in the box in today.
It's based on
they'll boil that frog, though. You wait.
So there are people who worry about that, and I think the same will be true about health and fitness data. So we've got to figure out how we make this data shareable, whether it's for...
That could be the dystopian view of it, which is if you don't wear a Basis watch, or if you're not tracking and sending your data to the cloud and weighing yourself in every day, your healthcare will cost double. But it might actually be a great idea because we have an obesity epidemic today.
We do have an obesity epidemic, it's true.
I say this what I don't understand is everybody's very persnickety about this issue. I think that I think it would be completely reasonable for your health insurance to be based on some objective measure like BMI, right? It seems like body mass index is one of the things that, just generally speaking, is easy to say how healthy somebody is. If they just made it so you had some sort of grace period over the next 5 years, we're going to get to this is the normal BMI range, and it could be generous, and if you're outside of that, it's just going to be 10% more. And if you're outside of that, it's going to be 20% more. Not even related to the actual cost, but just some way of giving people a discount. Actually, that's what you have to do it. You say you get a discount if you're in this BMI range.
It's all about incentives, right?
Do you think that would work? Do you think that's where society's headed?
I mean, clearly incentives do work in some models, and there are players in the world bigger than us, even Intel, who will help shape what these policies become. I guess for me as an individual user, what I want is some control of whether I have to or don't have to wear one of these devices and to what extent my data is shared. I still want some amount of control and privacy. Even if I decide to share it, it's important to me that I have the control. Yeah. It's important to me that these be opt-in moments. I am all for incentives if I get to choose the incentives. It's less interesting to me if it's mandated. And I think if we look at what's going to drive consumer motivation, I think for the user that opts in, they will be far more motivated than that exact same user if it was mandated. So I think we need to think about the psychology that's involved in mandating things. It's got to be like
an honest discount, right? It can't be we're going to give you a discount, but we actually doubled the prices of everything. So the discount is actually not a discount. It's sort of
yes. Well, the good news about the insurance industry is they're very, very data driven.
They are.
So I think we can rely on data to help driving these decisions for them. I think I hope what we see is some incentives being put in place. I think we do have a genuine epidemic here, and I would like to see some systemic sort of drivers in the right direction.
But the insurance companies, when you were in a startup, I hear this from a lot of startups talking about maybe insurance companies or corporate buyers buying these. And actually, a company I was working with bought it for 200 employees. They bought them another one. I think they all bought the Fitbit that goes around your arm.
Yep.
Are the insurance companies actually saying like, hey, can we deploy an enterprise system like this or deploy it to 1,000 employees on an opt-in basis just as like a benefit to try to make everybody healthier?
Yeah, and that's there's interest.
It's really happening,
There's interest
or it's just
in
interest?
that kind of thing.
But it's not happening.
It is happening.
It is.
It is happening.
What
I mean, you mentioned the one example of people who bought a Fitbit. I think it's happening. Actually, I think it's got more traction in what's called corporate wellness, even more so than insurance companies. There are plenty of companies who, spend a lot of money on the healthcare of their employees, even though the employees themselves also spend a lot of money on their healthcare.
Thousands to tens of thousands.
And all of us want to see those rates go down. So there are corporations who are buying programs inclusive of devices sometimes, although not always. Sometimes it's self-reporting. Sometimes it's an app. There's other ways of accomplishing this. Wearables is usually the most sort of reliable way of closing the loop, right? Self-reporting is a little bit.
They're so cheap though. What is the basis cost now? $200, $300?
$150 for.
It's $150. It's so cheap.
Yeah. Relative to what we're spending on healthcare anyway, right?
Well, that's what I'm talking about. I mean, for healthcare or your health, $150. What does a doctor visit cost today? What is going to the emergency room? What does a heart attack cost?
Yeah.
What is your monthly insurance cost? $500 a month, $1,000 a month?
So I think what we can say about this industry, again, is they're very data oriented. So I think there's a lot of interest. I think there are some testing and trials and studies going on to figure out, can we really get the data that says by wearing these devices or by completing these habits in an experience like ours, that it really does make a fundamental difference. I guess my only caution is, again, if you wear 3 different wearables, you can get 3 different results. So that's an issue that we, the industry, and particularly if it's going to be relevant to my insurance, well, that really matters, that the variability between these devices is what it is.
Yeah,
or
I
today.
give my watch to my son because he's an athlete to wear to get my insurance to qualify me.
Right.
Or
attach it to the dog's collar
exactly.
or whatever.
When people are having sex, right? Like, let's just cut to the chase here. Like, is there a way, because you have like 5 sensors, like, from the perspiration, heart rate. And
we have no algorithm that determines that.
You see, now you're talking to a poker player right here. You are absolutely lying right now.
No, we don't have an algorithm.
You certainly know from looking at that chart if somebody's having sex. Come on.
There's no way to tell.
Really?
There's no way to tell.
Because there was a spike in mine for like 2.5 hours the other night. I'm just joking. It's ridiculous.
But we wouldn't know what that is. You went for a run.
Absolutely. It was
you went for a run at 3 in the morning.
2.5 hours spike. I think you could actually tell.
But you'd know what it is, and that's more important to us that you know than we know.
What about the group stuff? Because that seems to motivate people. Are you going to add that as a feature? Like we can all because I have my 2 brothers and I are trying to get in shape. I want to I'm actually going to send them this and try to get them. But I want them to all be on the same thing and track each other together. Is that something you're going to
So social is pretty interesting, and there is some evidence that social can have some pretty powerful dynamics in terms of keeping people engaged in a routine. But we have learned a few things over time that sort of shapes our thinking about social. First of all, while there are some people who like the sort of just, post my accomplishment to Facebook approach to social, we don't think that that's terribly powerful.
No.
There are some people who are driven by competition.
Sure.
There are some people who are driven by co-opetition or co-op type of play.
Yeah, like community driven or more like what would you call it? It's just more collaborative.
Yes, exactly. Collaborative is exactly the right word.
We're getting there together.
That's right. That's what I'm. So right, but some people are looking for competitive. I want to win, not I want to cooperate.
Yeah. Who's going to run the fastest? Yeah.
Exactly. So I think there is evidence that some of these dynamics help some people. The question is, what is the best dynamic to help who we're after? And I'll just say that we're interested in that and still working on it.
So this is considered like the 1.5. You did 2 revisions of this. You got to have another version coming out. Will it be out this year for Christmas or not?
We don't comment on what we may or may not be working on. All I can say is, it's the tech world. You never stop working on the next thing, right?
When did this come out, the 1.5?
That came out in January.
So it's out for
This is what we call the Carbon Steel Edition.
Yeah.
That came out in CES of this year.
Beautiful watch. I mean, I really can't give it a big enough recommendation for people. I wouldn't – if you're listening to the show, you've got $150. I would not wait for the next version, which is why typically people don't want to say when things are coming out. So don't wait. Just buy it because it's 150 beans and you can wind up selling it or giving it to a friend. If the new one comes out, you really want to get it. But I am in love with this thing. And it really does change
when that came out in January, it was $200.
It was $200. $150 is so affordable. It's amazing. Is there a margin in there? You guys still make money off of it?
Well, it's more important that we help you get a healthier life, right?
But now that you're in Intel, right? You guys want to just get a ton of data and people use it. let's say 100 days out, how many people are still using these things? More than 50% or less than 50%?
So we don't report that data, but it is exactly one of the metrics that we do track, and one of the metrics that I hope everybody in this category tracks, because what we see over and over with all the products that we've tested and all the users that we've talked to is there's this magical novelty period when they get any of these devices, ours, any of them, simple ones, sophisticated ones, doesn't matter. And depending on the kind of user, that novelty period can last for a couple of weeks or for a couple of months. And then they fall off a cliff typically because, okay, now I kind of know how many steps I take per day, right? I know what 5,000 steps feels like. And it doesn't lead to action, and there's nothing to keep you going. It's one of the reasons that we built this healthy habit system that you were looking at. It's the thing that keeps people going. So
I'm addicted to it now.
All I can say is that we find our users, a greater percentage of our users, sticking with us for longer. That's what I can say for now.
All right, Jef of MyBasis. Everybody go to mybasis.com. Well done. I love the product. It's total genius. It gets my highest recommendation. Literally, I have every one of these things, and I just love it. It's great to have you on the program, having used it and hear directly from you what you put into it, because I think a lot of times you see a lot of people go into these spaces and they start, and I see everything, and I've seen so many people get into this space and just not get to the point at which the product's finished. Everybody starts and nobody finishes. I feel like you've got a very finished product here that I could use for the rest of my life. I could literally, as it stands now, I want to see this data every day. I love looking at my chart, looking at it weekly, and giving it to my doctor. My doctor's like, this is amazing. What is this, I think if I was a doctor, I would run a service for literally couple of $100 a month, where I would just say for $5,000 a year for rich people or affluent people, $3,000 a year. I'm going to set you up with this, the Weathing scale. We're going to do your blood work every 90 days, and we're going to just I'm going to have a nutritionist come, all this stuff. But the basis of it would be the basis, where you could just see all the data in one place. I mean, it's completely genius. Everybody should go.
Well, nothing could mean more to us than hearing that. Somebody's going to do that someday.
Yeah.
But the fact that you're getting value out of it every day, even weeks in, that's exactly what we're shooting for. I'm gratified to hear it.
Completely addicted to it. It's really, literally the best product in the market for this. And everybody, I mean, the reviews you've gotten were amazing. And I'm sure the investors did pretty well with this. So congratulations on the sales.
Well, all I'll say is you ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah. Oh, I like it. A little confidence. I'm what I think is going to happen, actually? I think I'm going to have either an Android or an Apple Watch for doing computer stuff, and I'm literally going to have this on. I think it's going to be people will wear two of these. The watch is such a perfect form factor for wearables. Glasses are terrible; those are a disaster. But the watch is so perfect. It just works. It's light. I mean, I love wearing it. It's easy. People love it. Everybody
it's familiar enough.
Familiar, so easy.
It's a great user interface location. You sort of take it for granted because we've all worn watches so long. Yeah. But as a way of quickly consuming small bits of data and easily
and when
interacting,
you're running,
it's the place. It's the best place. We've tried other places on the body, and just sometimes what's old ain't broke.
I like the other side too. See, I think what somebody should make is your basis, big. Unit here on both sides. And then you could be recording data on both. See, I think that's going to get super interesting is when people can start having multiple sensors on their bodies or something like that. Mm-hmm. You can really start to understand in 3 dimensions where people are going. Anyway, it's a brave new world, folks. And thank you to our sponsors. Thank you, Sharefile, and thank you, Scott Walker. Thanks to J&J. Everything's looking great. Luke Demont, Drew, everybody, Andrew, great job. And I am at Jason on Twitter, and the show is at TWI Startups. And you can also find us on the Instagram. Sometimes we put little clips up there, which is a lot of fun. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.